In this video, we are heading to Kansas City for the UFC fight night between Ian Garry and Carlos Prates. Alright, and today it is Friday and we are headed to Kansas City to visit my old college roommate, and we're going to spend the weekend in KC and attend the Ian Garry versus Carlos Prates UFC fight night. We got about a 3.5 to 4 hour drive ahead of us, so let's get into it.
One eternity later.
The drive ended up being not too bad. We only had to make one stop for gas on the way down. We got there on Friday evening and I was absolutely starving, so we went to Jack Stack Barbecue in downtown KC to grab a bite to eat. The food ended up being great, but we did get the meat sweats, which was an unfortunate side effect. But after the dinner, we went back to my buddy's place and we watched some Carlos Prates highlights to get pumped up for Saturday. And then later on in the night, we went to Westport to explore and ended up at Kelly's Westport Inn. If you haven't subbed yet, consider subbing. We drop high quality UFC content a couple times a week, and we're building a real cool community here, so if you want to be part of an up and coming MMA community, joining it from the start would be the most fun way to do so, so we'd love to have you. But back to the video. We stayed at Kelly's for a while and made a bunch of random friends there, and it was a pretty fun time. It reminded me a lot of the Soulard bars seen back in St. Louis if you've ever been to restaurants or bars down there, and overall it was a pretty neat neighborhood. After Kelly's, we had to dial in on our diets and make a mandatory stop at the Taco Bell Cantina to wrap up the night. But unfortunately, this came with some consequences, as the next morning my stomach was not very happy with the decision of getting Taco Bell the night before. We filled up on a nutritious breakfast of peanut butter filled pretzels. And then we had a Boulevard Brewery tour scheduled for noon, which is in downtown Kansas City. This place had a pretty cool restaurant bar area attached to it with a nice gift shop and a bunch of tours around the brewery, and it was real cool hearing about the history of Boulevard Brewing in Kansas City and getting to see everything that they do there. After the tour, it was still only early afternoon, around 2 p.m., so we decided to go back to my buddy's place for a bit to chill before going downtown for the UFC fights later that night. In the meantime, we watched some more Carlos Prates highlights, because what else are you going to do on a Carlos Prates fight night? And then we made our way down to the city. We got to downtown Kansas City around 5:30, but the main card didn't start till 8, so we wanted to go see a little bit of the city before going there. We were hungry and we wanted to grab some food first. We tried to go to Yard House, but this place was packed to the brim, so we decided to settle on Old Reliable Chipotle. Except Chipotle ran out of their new honey chicken, which is amazing, and the rice tasted pretty watery, so maybe it's not so reliable after all. After Chipotle, it was still only 6, and we had about 2 hours until the main card started, so we stopped in at KC Live, which is an outdoor large circle area. It's surrounded by different restaurants and bars, and then in the outdoor area they have this huge movie screen that they play a bunch of different sporting events on, and since the UFC was going on there this weekend, they had the prelim fights on, so we watched that, and there were a bunch of other people hanging around, so that was a pretty cool time. I should mention that it was TKO Takeover weekend in KC, and if you don't know what TKO is, they are the parent company that owns both the WWE and the UFC, so they had different merch stands and a bunch of WWE and UFC fans walking around, so it was a pretty cool atmosphere to be in down there for the fights. After checking out the area, we walked across the street to the T-Mobile Center, which is where the fights were, and it was about 6:30, so we entered the arena. They had a T-Mobile lady giving out $25 concession stand gift cards if you were a T-Mobile customer, so we just showed her screenshot proof and got our little cash for the night to save us some money. Then we had to make a wardrobe investment, and we got a pretty cool UFC Kansas City shirt. I'll post a picture of it right here. There was a little bit cooler shirt with a Kansas City picture on it, but they were sold out of this one, but we still settled for this pretty solid option. I then saw a National Guard tent with a bunch of hats on it, so me being the hat collector I am, I had to do my due diligence and stop by, and we got a free hat out of it, so it was pretty neat. And after a long and expensive concession stand line, it was finally time to watch some fights. This was my first UFC event I've ever been to live, so I was pretty stoked to see the fights. Our seats ended up being in the middle of section 110, so we had a pretty good view of the octagon. I got our tickets through the UFC official site, which seemed like the cheapest way to do it. We got our tickets for about $175 after taxes, and in the middle of the 100 sections, it was a pretty decent view. I think it was a pretty good deal overall, because the nosebleed seats seemed to be about the same price if I was looking through Ticketmaster or a different ticket selling site, so I was pretty happy with the deal we got. They ended up being resale tickets, so we got them for about $10 to $20 cheaper per ticket than we would have got them otherwise. And then as far as the fights go, we still got to see 2 or 3 fights on the prelims, which were pretty entertaining. And then as far as the main card goes, Randy Brown had a sweet knock. Giga Chikadze did not have a very impressive performance against David Onama, and the Anthony Smith fight was an absolute roller coaster. Zhang Minyang was just raining down elbows on Anthony Smith's head over and over again, and his head squirted open with blood and covered both opponents and the octagon with a bunch of blood, and then the ref finally called it a TKO finish for Zhang Minyang. And then after the fight, Anthony Smith starts flipping off a random fan and then going over the cage side and starts yelling at him. And then after that, we get a very emotional Anthony Smith retirement video up on the Jumbotron. So it was just the biggest roller coaster of emotions I've ever seen for one fight. It was interesting to see Anthony Smith get a tribute video because Stipe Miocic didn't even get a tribute video to my knowledge in his retirement fight, and he's widely regarded as a greater all-time fighter than Anthony Smith is, but it was cool to see. And now it was time for the main event. Carlos Prates had a sick walkout to Rick Ross on, and the crowd absolutely erupted when he made his way to the ring. During the fight, Ian Garry did outfight Carlos Prates for 3 to 4 rounds, which did make me sad, but to everyone's surprise, Carlos Prates' cigarette lungs did not seem to be a problem for him, as his best rounds were the last 2, and he was close to knocking out Ian Garry a few times, especially in that 5th round. He had Ian Garry crawling away, but he couldn't finish the deal. Another weird thing about that fight, there was about 5 million glove touches during the fight, which is cool to see mutual respect between the fighters, but it kind of takes away from the intimacy of an actual fight, where guys are supposed to be trying to knock each other out. Ian Garry ended up winning the decision, so oh well. You know, even though I wanted Carlos Prates to win, I did have some money on Ian Garry, so he did end up profitable on the night. I cooked up 3 parlays for this fight night, and they were all progression stemming off of each other, so I'll show you them in order here. The first parlay is a 3-leg moneyline parlay with a Zhang Minyang moneyline, Randy Brown moneyline, and Ikram Aliskerov moneyline. Ikram looked pretty good tonight as well. But that parlay cashed, so we made some profit there. And the second parlay was the same as the first parlay, but I added a Matt Schnell versus Jimmy Flick fight to not go the distance. That bet did not hit, except that fight almost got stopped about 20 times, and the ref kind of hit me with a Montreal screw job as he started to try to pull away the guillotine with about 10 seconds left in the round. But that fight almost ended so many different times, and it went the distance, so that ruined this parlay as well as the next parlay, which was the same as that parlay, but I added the Ian Garry money line to that one, which that one would have hit too, and it would have been about plus 300 something odds. So those would have been 2 nice parlays to hit. However, I had another $30 on the Ian Garry money line, so we still did come out profitable, maybe around 30 bucks in total at the end of the night. And I'll tell you, one of the most fun things about these fights is just the atmosphere of being there. There are so many different chants going around in the crowd. And there's even another fight that we didn't pay for that we saw pan out between 2 fans, and the whole crowd started cheering for that. So it was a super cool atmosphere to be in, and I would definitely recommend going to the fights if you haven't been to one before. After the fights, we went back to KC Live, which, if I didn't mention, was very similar to Ballpark Village if you've ever been there in St. Louis. But anyways, we needed to let the Uber and car traffic die down, so we went into Pizza Bar KC, which had the absolute greasiest pizza of all time. But to be honest, it was super good and a great way to end the weekend of ruining my diet and my summer body. I would definitely do it again. But as I said, overall, the fight card ended up being really good with a lot of entertaining finishes. I feel like we got really good value out of our seats. However, if it was a bigger city or a more expensive pay-per-view, where those seats were maybe $300, $400, $500, and for some of these pay-per-views, they're like $1,000. I could see how that could be a tough purchase for some people. However, if you're a big UFC fan, I would definitely recommend going to a fight at some time, just because that atmosphere of being there is so fun to be a part of, and the fights are really cool to watch live. An underrated thing that I really liked is in between fights, they had the lights on in the arena, but then as soon as the round started, the arena went black and it focused in on the white overhead lights going right down on the ring, which was a really cool lighting to have and made the fights very easy to watch. The main event fighters like Ian Garry and Carlos Prates had sick walkouts where the arenas went black, and that was super cool to be a part of. Kind of felt like WWE walkouts, and these ones were super cool. But yeah, if you've made it through this video, thank you for watching this far. Leave a like and sub if you're a G, and let me know feedback down below. Do you like vlogs? Would you want to see more MMA related vlogs? Or let me know what you want to see down below. But with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one. Deuces.